Caledonian elixir.
Really appreciate you having me and going through all the contortions to get me on here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you on too. So for the audience, could you describe a little bit about your background, how you became interested in the paranormal, and
Yeah, it's a very long story, but I'm going to try to make it short and sweet just to get us going here. When I was 18 months old, and I think this is where it started for me. Now, it may have started at birth. I don't know. My parents may be, abduction people. I don't know. But I was 18 months old, and my parents took myself and my grandmother to the Oregon coast. We lived in Portland, Oregon. And the Oregon coast is about 70 miles from downtown Portland, maybe 80, whatever. Anyhow, the point is we get to this cabin, and it's a friend's cabin, and it's it must have been 1958, 59. And back then, there's no cell phones. There isn't even a phone in this cabin. I mean, it's like in the middle of the coast and nothing there. And when you walked in, there was a staircase going up to the second floor. And underneath the staircase, back in the old days, you would put your firewood under there and you keep it dry for the winter, because it rains in Oregon all the time, just like Scotland.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there you go. And so
Unlike California, we actually get weather. In California, it's just warm and sunny all the time.
Exactly. And by the way, I'm a fourth Scottish and a fourth Irish, and I'm half Italian. So it's kind of like if I ever went to Scotland, I'd never come home. I swear to God, I love it there. I peruse Google Maps all the time looking at Scotland, and maybe I'll end up there someday. But anyhow, back to the story. We're in the cabin, and there's a note on the table to my parents saying, we know you have a toddler. Be sure to pick up all the rat poison. It's everywhere. So it's in pie tins on the floor throughout the building. And my parents went through and thought they picked it all up. My dad goes to build a fire, and he opens the doorway to the under staircase area where the wood is. And he left it open, and I crawled in there, and I was playing around and found a pie tin full of this really sweet stuff, and I started eating it. So the next thing I know, I don't remember any of this, but my grandmother finds me and sees all this rat poison around my mouth, and she's very freaked out. And my mother just washes my mouth out and says, "Oh, she'll be fine." And my grandmother says, "No, she won't be fine. She's going to die. We got to take her to the hospital right now." So it's about an hour and a half away to the hospital. And anymore, but maybe everything's fine. So there we go. I'm back. Anyhow, so they drive me to the hospital. By the time they got to the hospital, the rat poison had kicked in, and and this is very gross, folks, so just, I'm just going to say it once real quick. I was actually bleeding through my veins, and my skin was turning purple and blue and all kinds of stuff. Because what that rat poison does is it's got warfarin in it, and what it does is it blows up your red corpuscles or blood cells, and they become just liquefied, and your organs become liquefied. Anyhow, long story short, by the time they got me there, my grandmother, my parents were pretty sure I wasn't going to make it through the night. That's what they told them at the hospital. I'd probably die. But they pumped my stomach and they did a bunch of things to me, and they were going to start doing blood transfusions, and my parents had to go sign some documents, and it was really late at night now. And my grandmother was left with me at the crib in the room in the hospital. And she started to fall asleep. And my dad specifically said to her, "Don't fall asleep. If anything happens, I want you to scream to the doctors or the nurses and get them in here." And my grandmother starts to fall asleep. And as she does, she sees the angel that came in her window when she was about 12 or 13 years old, dying from rheumatic fever at our family farm. It came in the window and fluttered over her bed and told her she was going to be fine and she was going to live, and she had work to do, which I found fascinating, because the angel over my crib said to her, it wasn't, she says it was the same angel, but I don't know, maybe it was my angel, who knows. And it said to her, "Your granddaughter's not going to die. She's got work to do. So don't worry about her." So my grandmother fell asleep. My dad came back in with my mom, and they were furious because my grandmother was asleep. And they said to her, "What if she died and she was all alone?" They were freaking out. And my grandmother said, "Oh, she's going to be fine." And she got her coat and got up and said, "Drive me home. I want to go home. It's going to be fine." And my dad was livid. He didn't talk to her for, I think, 6 months. 6 months after that. But they finally made up. But it's all good. So I think that was the moment that I received some kind of psychic ability, because from that point on, things got really crazy. About 5 years later, 6 years later, I manifested a rabbit, and I'm still trying to figure out how that all happened. Do you want to hear the
Sorry,
story?
what do you mean manifested a rabbit?
Well, let me tell you the story. It's about 5 minutes long. We have time for it?
Well, yeah, we've got time. Yeah, I suppose we
Yeah,
do.
great. Okay. So I'm 6 years old, and we're going to the Multnomah County Fair. And back in the 60s, 1963, the only things at the Multnomah County Fair are animals from 4-H, a big Ferris wheel, a lot of country dancing, flower arrangements, baked goods, that kind of thing. There's no internet. There's no neon lights. I mean, this is cotton candy and hot dogs, and that's it. Okay. So we get there. My grandfather, since we're on a farm, we have sheep, we have donkeys, we have chickens, we have all kinds of stuff. He says, "I want to go look at the sheep. You stay here," because I was by the rabbits, and I thought, "Oh, this is great. I'll play with the rabbits." So he asked this boy and girl, brother and sister, that had just won first prize for their buck, the black long-eared rabbit, if I could sit and play with the rabbit. And they said, "Oh, sure, no problem." And I sat down and I held this rabbit. Now, about 45 minutes goes by. I haven't moved. I'm just sitting there holding this rabbit. And I've fallen totally in love with it. By the time my grandparents get back and say, "Okay, we're getting in the car, we're leaving," I'm crying because I want the rabbit. And of course, I throw a fit. And they asked the brother and sister, "Can we buy the rabbit?" And they said, "No, we're going to keep it because we need it to breed." And he said, "Okay, fine." And he looked at me and says, "I don't want to build a hutch. We're not getting a rabbit. We're going home." So all the way home in the car. Now, back in the old days, folks, they had what they called bench seats. And you could, as a kid, we were not strapped in with seatbelts or anything back then. This is like 1963. I'm sliding back and forth on the bench seat between my grandmother and my grandfather, whispering in each of their ears, "Please tell Grandpa to get me a rabbit." Then I go to Grandpa, "Please, Grandpa, build me a hut." I'm going back and forth all the way home. About 6 blocks before we get to the house, I decide to pull the Catholic guilt card. Okay. So I get right in the middle of them. I put my hands together. I pull them down. I bow my head, and "Dear God," and I'm hanging over the seat, right? "Dear God, please give me a rabbit. I really want a rabbit, just like the one back at the county fair." And I say this out loud, really loud. And then I say, "Amen." And I'm doing the whole thing, right? Because I just started first grade, and Sister Mary Orme would have been very proud of me. Anyhow, long story short, during that moment, and it's happened to me 3 times since then. This is the only times in my life this has happened. I felt this rush of love. I can't even explain to people. It was so crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this must be what prayer's like, like when God hears your prayer. And maybe it is, I don't know. But we pull into the driveway. Now, at most farms, as you know, they're all fenced in and they've got a gate in front of them so the livestock never escapes. And we pull up to the gate, and there's this black blob right on the other side of the gate, sitting right in the middle of the road, of the driveway. And my grandparents looked at it. They looked at each other. They looked at me. They looked back at it again. And my grandfather gets out of the car. He opens the gate, and there is a rabbit. I swear to God. Same make and model, if you want to call it, of the rabbit we just left at the county fair. Same one. I mean, literally the same breed, everything. Black, male, the whole bit. Okay.
Right.
And they're dumbfounded. They're looking at each other. And my sister, who came with us, she's like 3 years old. She's clapping and she's all excited that we got a rabbit. And my grandfather and it just sits there waiting for him to pick it up. He picks it up, he brings it over to me, and he says, I guess I have to build that hutch after all. And that's how the rabbit came. So to this day, we have no idea. Well, we know how the rabbit got there because 3 months later, the brother and sister who owned the rabbit that lived down the street said it escaped that day. Somehow it escaped out of the hutch. Now, here's my thing about that. I'm into time travel, and I'm wondering if my future self didn't somehow manifest somebody to get that rabbit out of the hutch and put it back in that driveway to get me to where I am today. Because without that experience, none of my life would have happened, because that was the jumping off point for me. Many years later, when I was 53 years old, I was reminded about that experience. And then everything else that happened after that was paranormal came flooding back into my life. And then I eventually ended up on Coast to Coast AM talking about this rabbit story and everything that has happened to me since then. And it's been quite remarkable. But if it wasn't for
your juvenile prayers came true.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it was just so crazy. I was 53 years old before I really got involved in all the UFO stuff, the paranormal, anything. I was pretty busy having a dance career and a business career. And I was married to 2 computer guys in Silicon Valley at the time, not at the same time, wasn't married to both of them at the same time, but consecutively. And very much involved in the computer scene here in the Bay Area. So a lot of crazy things have happened, but that was the jumping off point for me, was the rabbit story.
Could you describe for the audience what MUFON is? Because you are a director of MUFON, I believe.
Oh yeah, I was 53 years old, and I decided I was going to start a MUFON group. I went to meet the Northern California director at the time and his state subdirector. And they said, we'd love to have you do the MUFON group. And ever since then, it's been wild because of doing the MUFON group, I've also started a big conference called UFO Con. And it's UFO Con and then the year. And I've been doing it for 14 years. This coming year will be our 15th year. And what sets my conference apart from everybody else's conferences is the fact that you have to be an experiencer to get on the stage. You can't, I mean, I let other people on that aren't experiencers, but I'd say 85% of them are. And the last couple of guys that maybe aren't are people like Danny Sheehan and Stephen Bassett, because they're friends of mine. And they are advocates for the UFO community. And that's the only reason they get on my stage, because I always tell them, I said, no, you can't speak this year. And they're like, please let us. So anyhow.
Could you tell us what the acronym is for MUFON, what it stands for?
I'm sorry, what was that? I kind of missed the first part.
What is the acronym for MUFON? What does it stand for?
Oh, Mutual UFO Network.
Right. And you mentioned that the individuals who are invited onto your conference are experiencers. And I've noticed that many of the individuals involved in the the alien abduction phenomenon refer to themselves as experiencers now. However, back 20, 30 years ago, when I read literature written by, for example, Whitley Strieber or Jacques Vallée, they weren't using that terminology. They were referring to themselves as abductees, others even as victims. So,
Exactly.
do you think there is a change in terms of how people see themselves in relation to the alien abduction experience, but they're actually embracing the encounter as opposed to seeing themselves as victims of it?
Well, it depends on each person because I have a very well, she's not a close friend now, but back in the day when I was doing my mind control conferences, which we'll get to, I'm sure,
Yeah.
within this podcast. Her name is Niara Isley, and she was recently seen on Redacted. I think that's the name of the show. And you guys could go over there and watch her testimony. But she was victimized to the point where she's still so traumatized by what happened to her that when she was on my stage, she could barely talk about it. And this was
Mhm.
back 15 years ago. Um, and that's her reaction to it. But of course, she was brutalized during her experiences. And I have other friends that have had crazy experiences where they should be having PTSD, and they've
Mhm.
accepted the fact that they have a relationship with ET at some level, and they're fine with it.
Mhm.
And so I say to everybody, it is truly on an individual basis, whether you're an abductee, a contactee. Now, I consider myself a contactee, and I'll tell you why in a minute, or an experiencer, somebody who's seen a UFO, seen an alien, talked to an alien, and not really had any traumatic experiences with them, and maybe are part of this whole new galactic federation that they talk about or whatever, and they're having positive, almost kind of like religious experiences with these guys, whereas the Whitley Strieber type of people, like my good friend Melinda Leslie, who's been,
Yeah.
had kids up in space and been probed by the Greys and seen the mantis beings and, those type of things. You'd think she'd have such horrible PTSD that she can't talk, right? But she's
Mhm.
fine. She's absolutely fine because she's built a relationship with them around what they've done to her. And I think that separates everybody into categories. But like I said, it's all individual. Like Whitley at first, he would have considered himself truly an abductee. Now that you talk to him, he's more as an experiencer or a
Yeah, yeah.
contactee because,
Mm.
yeah.
I mean, personally, I believe UFOs are the more modern acronym UAPs are physically real, that there is so much evidence publicly available now. We could go back over 70 years to when the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement stating that they recovered the crashed flying disc. And after that, we got the investigations in the 1950s, from the Robertson panel, the Condon report, Project Blue Book,
Mhm.
investigations by reputable Harvard professors such as John Mack to modern congressional committees. Recently, where it was disclosed that they are crash retrieval programs. So, Lorien, why is it when it is stated in the US Congress that they are crash retrieval programs, why does alien contact still appear almost like science fiction? Like there is no hysteria about it. But to me, it still feels like science fiction. Why is that?
Okay. Now you've brought up two things here. You brought up the space program, which you believe that a lot of the UFOs we see nowadays are ours. Is that correct? Is that what I heard in the first part of that
Yeah.
comment?
Well, the congressional committee disclosed that they are crash retrieval programs, and there are you know, objects that don't belong to any nation state. So I don't know if these are interdimensional objects, crafts, or however describing them, but they're not terrestrial or belong to any nation state.
Oh, okay. I see. I thought you were inferring that they were ours. And I will make a distinction right here and now. Yes, we do have crash retrieval programs. I have spoken with many people over the years, and I can't disclose it. I'm very sorry. most of the men that I worked with over the last 25 years that have actually been involved with crash retrievals, one of them being Clifford Stone, who's now passed on. I can talk about him. He was probably one of the first guys that was ever assigned, you are the crash retrieval guy, okay? And he did it for about a decade, or maybe longer. I can't remember. But there have been many people. Now, I was lucky or unlucky enough to have discovered that these super soldiers, what we call them, the guys that are a part of these crash retrievals, 20 years ago, we didn't have a name for them. You know, like Jake Barber's come out. You know all about that, I'm sure, right? About
No,
the News
I'm not
Nation.
familiar with that, to be honest.
Yeah, Ross Coulthard has interviewed a gentleman by the name of Jake Barber, who is the crash retrieval guy right now for many governments. Okay, and
Okay.
maybe he's not doing it anymore. I don't know, but the point is, we've always had this program since 1947, maybe before 47, because there was a crash in 42 that we actually recovered items from. But that's another story. So, long story short, we know about the crashes. We actually probably caused some of the crashes just to get the tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that if you want to call them aliens, ET, other dimensional beings, whatever you want to call them, have allowed us to get their stuff. Because I'll tell you something, if they didn't want us
The
to have it,
technology.
I'm sorry?
It's almost like a deposit of technology because they want us to utilize it and use it for
Exactly.
our own
I'm
civilization.
telling you, from what I know about ET, there is no way that is getting in our hands without them giving it to us. It's
Well,
that simple.
isn't it Colonel Corso? Didn't he say something similar that we retrieved the technology of fiber optic cables that it came from a crash retrieval program? He wrote about
Well,
that many decades
to
ago.
be honest about the fiber optics, I have done the deep dive on that, and fiber optics were developed actually in a rudimentary way before the crash at Roswell or before any crash retrievals. And it may have been refined because of their
Mhm.
findings, but I know the people. I know of the companies and the groups that were developing. Bell was it was Bell Howell at the time. There were different groups way back in the 30s and 40s that were actually developing fiber optic, and they were doing it with glass, just straight glass, and it wasn't quite as thin or as small. But when they discovered it possibly on the Roswell crash, I think it gave them ideas to pursue it at a different level. Okay. And
Mhm.
it took many years for them to be able to even do it because of the plastics. Okay. So that's another whole issue. But anyhow, I think Corso's right on many levels, but I think all those guys that talk about ET and ET craft, they always throw in a little bit of extra information that isn't necessarily true. And I would say, just like Richard Doty and all the other people involved in the CIA or PSYOPs or the DARPA or EG&G or whoever they are, if they're going to give you information, don't expect every last tidbit of it to be true. But there's enough truth
You,
in there that you can pull
but
it out.
are you implying that it's not so much exaggeration as misdirection?
Yes, I am.
Mhm.
Absolutely. These guys that run the show, and they're the interface between us and the extraterrestrial beings that do help here on this planet. And I'm not sure that they're helping as much as they are controlling. I don't know. I'm at a point now where I'll be 68 next week, and I know less now than I did 50 years ago when I started researching.
Mm.
Okay, it gets more complicated. The deeper you go, the more you find out. Then you realize this is such a big deal in our secret government that the way things are playing out right now, I'm shocked, to be honest with you. That did you hear, is it Congressman Luna yesterday. She was interviewed on a podcast and said,
Joe Rogan.
I believe there's extra dimensional beings here.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah,
wild, you know? So I'm wondering how all this information is getting out. But I do know this. In 2017, when they said, we're going to give you disclosure, I said, yes, they are going to give us disclosure, but it's going to be 50 years from now. So what they're doing is they're doing what I call the slow drip of disclosure. And every year we get a little more, and they want my generation to go bye-bye because they don't want us around anymore because we're the ones who, we've got the religious beliefs, we've got the problems with it. We're pissed at them for hiding it from us. We've got all the reasons to get angry with them, whereas the kids that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s right now, I call kids, the young adults, they've accepted it since they were born. So they don't worry.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
That's what I was alluding to, the fact that when it's stated in the US Congress that they are crash retrieval programs and they are biologics, which is the term they were using for a recovered alien body. And there is nothing, in terms of the people I know who are in their 30s, 20s, they don't care. There is no hysteria. They're just getting on with their life.
That's my whole point, that by the time they're 50, I think a lot more disclosure will happen. I think they're just slowly going to drip out, like Luna yesterday with her comment about other dimensional beings. I'm telling you, the people in the UFO community are going wild over it, number one. Number two, the people in the UFO community that are religious are going wild over it because they're all saying, oh, she's talking about Satan or the devil or, whatever. And I'm saying, no, that's not what she's all talking about. They're angels too, I mean, come on.
In fact, I'm going to play a short video because you're talking about how people are responding to encounters or the video 2.
They looked like dolls. They looked so incredible that I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind faintly registered the spectacle. I wasn't even scared, just mildly surprised and stupefied. These things were moving towards me. There were 5 of them, and before I knew what was happening, one of them, the tallest and the largest by far, was very, very close.
I had to terminate that video. For some reason, when I'm playing videos or even the intro, which is part of as a video in my stream, it's slagging. So I'm just not going to go there at the moment. But the one case,
but I know about that video. Yeah.
I think was that John Mack that was conducting that interview?
I believe that it might have been John. I know that David Icke was down there at one point, and there was also Michael Tellinger was with him at one point. Right. I'm not sure which one interview, but I remember that interview. That was very amazing. That was a wonderful interview with him. I can't remember his name for the life of me.
No. And I don't even think his name's mentioned in the interview. But
it may not be, but he's one of the guys that knows about the dog stars, and he knows about
that's it.
Their whole tribe knows all about Sirius A and B, and you can't see them. So, I mean, how did they even know about that? So that is an amazing situation, and for him to be a contactee too is even more of an amazing situation.
And he, in terms of how he felt when he encountered that being, he did suggest that he was a bit disgusted by how it smelled. Its appearance affected him, but it didn't terrify him. But the one case that terrified me as a kid, and I've mentioned this in previous episodes, is the Whitley Strieber abduction. And as you know, Strieber went on to write about his experiences in many books he authored, and you surely, you've read Communion. And I'm not sure why, but maybe it's his use of description, but that book genuinely freaked me out when I was a kid. And even Christopher Walken in the movie adaptation, his performance freaked me out. Is one thing about Christopher Walken, regardless of what film he's casted in, he always plays Christopher Walken. He's always the same. But for the audience unfamiliar with that case, what essentially happened is in 1985, Whitley and his family at a secluded cabin he owned in upstate New York celebrated Christmas. However, later that night, the cabin was enveloped in light, and Whitley awoke in his bed surrounded by what he called visitors that were beings that did not appear to be human, and they took him from a cabin to a place he described as small and circular and smelly, where he was experimented on by beings that had, the large inky black eyes, small willowy body, and the large bulbous heads. And Whitley, at some point that night, lost consciousness, woke up the next day in his bed feeling confused. And eventually, he contacted Bud Hopkins, who suggested that he be hypnotized, and under hypnosis, he recovered his memories. But another thing I find very intriguing about the case with Whitley Strieber is he has accounts when, as a child, he was a victim of a program similar to like a Skinner box that had been put in a deprivation room, but deeply traumatized him. And have you got any
Absolutely.
thoughts? Have you got any thoughts as to his background in terms of how he was an experiencer and
Well, now
relationship?
this is opening up, like you said, the thing about Whitley that he's finally discovered is the fact that once you're in a program with ET, you're going to be experiencing them the rest of your life. Now, he
Mhm.
had to backtrack his whole experiences because he didn't remember as a child all the things that happened to him. And what we must remember, I can't remember, it's the school. He called it The Secret School, I think was the name of the book. I
Yeah.
don't remember, but I did read it. And most of my friends that are major contactees like Whitley have finally recovered memories of being in some type of situation similar to Whitley's. Now, Whitley's situation is that he was on a military base as a child most of his life, and that all these kids that were in the secret school of his, I think there were 8 or 12, like it was 8 to 12, so some kind of number, were also all military kids. So this is some kind of arrangement between the military allowing this to happen on their bases with the ETs, or maybe the ETs never told them, in my opinion, I don't know. But I got a strong suspicion that our military was allowing this to happen with a certain amount of children to get them familiar with the whole ET experience for later in the 80s and 90s, they'd be able to start exposing this. I think this goes back. This is part of disclosure way back into the 50s and 60s, that they were allowing children to be, taken and used and educated by ET, so that at some point in their life, they were going to expose the whole ET conundrum like Whitley did. Whitley's book, outfacing in bookstores and windows of bookstores, turned on a switch in all the people that have ever been a contactee. I think it was a mind control trigger. I think that the ETs planned it. I knew that they knew that book was going to come out. They knew Whitley was going to write it, and they knew their picture was going to be on the cover. And that was going to be the beginning of real disclosure on this planet.
Do you
That's my
think there
take
was
on it.
do you think there was a degree of compartmentalization or dissonance in regards to Whitley writing that book? So you described how that image in the front cover of the grey sort of triggered something in everyone that saw it. The very
That's
act.
right. It triggered thousands and thousands of people to wake up to the fact that they are a contactee. It just started the ball rolling, as they say.
Mhm.
Okay. And when that book come out, I think it was 80, was it 84? Something like that. Anyhow,
I can
it
remember.
it it started changing the mindset around having extraterrestrial contact. And then when the movie came out, oh my God, that did a number on people too. But now you got to remember, there's a government slant to that, and they made it scary. So that's what the government does to this whole contact thing. Whereas if you talk to a contactee about it, 99% of them tell you, yeah, I got abducted, I was taken, but I learned so much, and in the end, I have a relationship with them. Whereas that movie scared people so badly, I think the government had a huge say in what happened with that movie. And I think they did that on purpose to start scaring all the contactees that were waking up so they wouldn't talk. I think that's what that was all about.
It's not just communion. The dramatization, the film adaptation of Fire in the Sky, the Travis Walton experience, that was so altered. Even the appearance of the
exactly.
They didn't appear as greys. They were aggressive, throwing them around on the table. They had great strength. And Travis Walton, if I remember correctly, reported he actually met human beings and was taken to a base after his abduction. None of that is, in the film at all.
Absolutely. Travis and I have known each other for years, and I can tell you this, there were a few years, I remember in 2012, I was at a conference with him, and he was so pissed off. There was something that happened, and somebody kept bugging him about the fact that the gray aliens got him, and he kept trying to tell people, even at the conference. I mean, it took him years to get people to stop thinking about the gray aliens. They weren't gray aliens for him. They were whitish skinned, big eyes. They were aliens, but I think they were hybrids. That's my opinion. They were more human looking than a gray alien. And
in the film, they had small eyes, and they had, great strength. They were very aggressive with him. And if I'm correct in his description of his experience, when he pushed them away, they went right back. They had no integrity to their, no physical integrity. They couldn't resist his strength.
That's right. That's absolutely true. And I'll never forget it. He was so angry, and I tried to interview him that year, because I try to interview him every year just to see how he's changing about the whole subject. And he would not do an interview with anybody after that person pissed him off. It was pretty funny, but it's true. I mean, everybody's story gets confabulated. That's why when I go on a show, I'm very succinct about what I say and how I say it, because I say it the same every time. I want people to know that when I had an experience with, about the rabbit or almost dying, or, whatever it is that triggered my contact with what I call white light beings. We haven't even gotten to that story yet, but they literally are what I call angels of the Bible, these white light beings. And they're very different than what everybody else is experiencing. So I'm very clear on that. And I'm very clear about my friends like Travis and Whitley and all those people that have had these other type of experiences. And, I think like I said earlier, I think we all get what we agreed to at some point, because the contact that I've had is very profound. I've had downloads that'll blow your mind that I don't even talk about, because it's just, I think it's for me, I think it's meant for me to know, and for me to parse out when it's needed, and give information to people as they ask for it. Because one of the things I do as a MUFON director is, if people come to me and say, I got this problem with the ET or whatever, I can actually counsel them a little bit and help them out, because I've been there. I know what it's like to have all kinds of crazy experiences and not be able to deal with it so well. So
is that
it really
go ahead. Of MUFON and someone who's researched this phenomenon a long time, is there any case or cases of alien contact abduction that really stood out to you, that was really different from the norm, and maybe even terrified you in a way, such as like the Whitley Strieber abduction did to me when I was young?
I've never been terrified of any of it. Well, you know what? I take that back. There's one case. It's called the Mojave Incident. Have you ever heard about it?
No, no.
I'm not going to do it justice, but I'll tell everybody go to Amazon. UK probably sells it. It's called the Mojave, like the Mojave Desert, Mojave, the Mojave Incident. The book is by Ron Felber, Felber, Ron Felber. And it is the absolute true story of a couple that went out to the Mojave Desert. The husband was going to go out hunting. The wife thought she'd come along and keep him company. I don't remember the whole story because it's been a lot of years since I read the book. But long story short, they had a terrifying 24 hours of absolute hell. Their camper truck was surrounded by black gray aliens with red eyes that were doing thought experiments on them and sending hate their way, and it was just almost demonic and so horrible for these people. They saw an alien invasion with ships. There were hundreds of ships landing in the desert. That they went through all kinds of stuff. Now, whether there were hundreds of ships or one, to this day, I don't remember how they quantified it in the book, but the bottom line was they were terrified. And I cannot to this day, even though I have connections with them, get them to come on my radio show, speak at my conference, or attend it or anything, because they have become quite reclusive about it and extremely afraid. And I don't blame them. But I hope it's been a lot of years since it happened to them, and I do hope that they've come to some kind of reconciliation with what happened to them with the ETs, and they're not as pissed off with them as they used to be. But that's a terrifying story. If you guys want to get scared about ET, that's the book to read because it'll blow your mind.
Yeah, but do you know what? That reminded me of a case, and I couldn't do it justice. I can't really recall it that well. However, it involved a family, and they lived in a rural area. There weren't a lot of our houses around, and the family said that their house was surrounded by not a alien that they described as like greys, but it was small and willy, and it could climb up on top of our house and try to get in through the windows. And the father got the shotgun out, and the entire family spent the whole night fighting off many of these beings that tried to attack them. The local authorities got involved. I wish I could remember where it was and do the story justice, but that one was quite frightening because there was a malevolence involved where they tried to attack the family and got a gun.
I think I know which story you're talking about, and it happened, I think, in Kentucky. I'm trying to remember the whole thing, but yeah, that I've heard of a couple of cases like that actually, and I've interviewed people who've had these things happen to them. I've been very lucky over the years, Vincent, where people come to me and I'll do an interview with them, and they'll never do an interview with anybody else again just because they got it off their chest, I think. And I have some extraordinary stories about abduction, and it's quite remarkable. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are very few people that have that kind of thing happen to them that seek fame and fortune, if I want to call it that. They really don't. They want to get it off their chest. They want to tell the story. They want it done. They want to tell it to somebody like you or I. And then they never talk about it again, which is kind of nice. But it's like, we don't have that story to study too well because it wasn't documented like in a book or anything. But yeah, that's an interesting point. A lot of people who have some really horrific stuff happen to them, they don't go on the speaking circuit by any means, and a lot of them won't even write a book about it. So how many people are actually having horrific, horrible events happen to them? I think it's way underplayed, and there's probably much more than we know about in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, how many people actually interpret it as a paranormal event. Some people just interpret it as a malevolent and aggressive event, but to actually recollect it, and it happens a lot with people who experience trauma. They often form screen memories, or they often push that experience deep into their subconscious, where they don't need to engage with it on a daily basis. So it's not something they live with consciously every day. It's something that they would rather not confront, especially if it is something so abnormal, so strange that it involves something they can't really understand.
Absolutely. Yes. I totally agree with you.
But I tried.
It's
I,
Go
I was
ahead.
I tried to play that video of John Mack earlier interviewing an alleged alien contactee. However, if I'm right, Mack concluded the abduction experience is a real phenomenon that sort of penetrates into a spiritual dimension of human existence. And in the book American Cosmic by Diana Pasulka describes how the UFO has become a cultural meme, and in some cases like a spiritual symbol. And for so many individuals who allege that they're abductees, I read how they regard their abduction as a spiritual experience, a sort of personal illumination. And so there's a transformative effect on the mind as a result of contact, isn't there? So can you speak to like the powerful psychological impact that we sort of like touched on there of contact or being abducted, in terms of how it changes their spiritual outlook?
Absolutely. I must say the Diana's book was very insightful, but there's one piece she's missing. It's the fact that not all abductees or contactees will eventually end up on the spiritual side. Now, I got to say, 99% of the contactees, experiencers, abductees that I know, as they gotten older, they have become very close to God, if you want to call it the God syndrome or whatever. They have literally, me too. I tell everybody every day that I pray more now than I've ever prayed in my entire life to what I call the source. And if you ask any abductee, contactee, experiencer out there right now, they will tell you the same thing. It's not the God of the religious Bible. It's not the Jesus Christ of the Bible, or Buddha or Muhammad or whatever. It is a source field. It is what's created all of us. It is connected to the ETs. It's connected to us. It's the universal mind. It's the mother consciousness, whatever you want to call it. We are all now part of it because of our ET experience. One of the things the ETs have told me, and mine are white light beings that I consider angels. That's just my opinion about them, because when I was taken, when I was about 29 years old, there was an experience I had where one of them appeared by the side of my bed and touched me on the forehead and did this to me. By the time the finger was done touching my bridge of my nose, I was propelled to God, and I was in front of the source or God or whatever. And I tried to touch his face, but there was no face to have. He was just light. It was another white light being, but even more profound. And I don't want to go into the whole story because it's quite crazy. But long story short on that is that if you talk to most of your experiencers, or most of your near-death experiencers, or people that have had abduction as compared to an angel existed, being with them, every one of them will tell you that the older I get, the closer I am to that source God connection. And most of them pray to that source God or connect with it on a daily basis a lot. And I'll bring Chris Bledsoe into this. You know about Chris's story, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, Chris Bledsoe. His book is called UFO of God. It is a bestseller in the United States right now. He has Diane Pasulka and he are very good friends. He has traveled with her. He's gone to Congress and spoken to them about his experiences, both good and evil. I mean, we're just going to put it in those categories for now. His initial experience was not very pleasant, And then later in the experience, he met up with a lady. He calls her the lady. And I have had a lady experiences too, but I'm not going to go into mine. But long story short, she told him that the world, as we know it, will be coming to an end on Easter of 2026. So there's that. There's that, which I find very interesting. And the reason I think Chris is embracing that phenomenon in that way is because he and all my other friends who have been given a date and a time don't understand that everything changes once that word is out. That's number one. Number two, that the being that is talking to you may be talking about your physical change. Your physical world may change at that time. Mm-hmm. I don't think I don't think they mean it like we're all going to change. But you never know. I mean, we got a date, we got a time. Have you heard about this new Atlas thing that's happening? This asteroid that's supposedly coming and ending our world as we know it too? Look.
Definitely interesting.
It's all crazy. In my opinion, it's all crazy because here's the thing. Once you're a contactee, once all that happens to you, you're connected to the universal consciousness. You right now, as Vincent, could go out and do DMT and you can connect to the same universal consciousness. You don't need ETs to do it. And I say that as, you know, like the shaman, they used to do mushrooms all day long and talk to God. Okay.
Yeah.
Get to the same. What was that?
Definitely. Whether you could go into Siberian shamanism or Patagonian shamanism. There is a lot of use of drugs. South America with ayahuasca and stuff like that.
Ayahuasca.
You can go to voodoo too, like where they use the rhythm, the beating of the drums, and the dancing to alter a state of consciousness where you can have a shared experience with everyone present. Altered states is fascinating. And
I think it's the same dimensional space that when we die we might go to, or that the ETs are in. Now, I will tell you this. I do know, probably for the most of my life I've known it, but I was just a few years ago, somebody within a government organization confirmed it for me. The gray aliens that are with us here on this planet, not the ones that look like humans or anything, but the gray aliens, the mantis beings, and possibly the reptilians. I'm not sure where they're involved in this, but I'm assuming they do the same type of thing. What the gray aliens do, which is why I was very impressed by Miss Luna and her testimony about interdimensional beings, is because I was told by this person that our government knows for a fact that the UFOs, the gray aliens, all this contact is happening interdimensionally. And when I say interdimensionally, they are within our molecular structure at all times. It's an overlay onto this dimension. And there's probably 11 or 12 or 15 dimensions overlaid within our world, if you want to look at it that way. But what the Greys did is they built a system that looks like a UFO, that is like a holodeck on the Star Trek Enterprise or whatever, that they can bring us to molecularly, because it's very hard for them on a molecular level to get to our dimension. So they built this UFO, if you want to call it that. What it is it's a non-time, non-space molecular structure that we can all meet in, and they can do whatever they want with us, and we can talk to them and what have you, and we're all not being harmed on a molecular level. Okay, I don't know how to explain this too well, but the aliens call it the slots, SLOTS. This is what I've heard from certain sources, and our scientists really don't understand how they did it. And I'll give you an example. Gary Nolan was in the movie The Phenomenon that James Fox made, and he took a piece of one of the ships and he put it under an electron microscope, and his comment just blew me away. I fell on the floor, literally. I fell out of my chair watching this thing, because he said the molecular structure, the protons, the neutrons, and the electrons were all so far away from each other that it can't exist in our dimension. And that blew me away. But here's the real kicker, you guys. It has nothing to do with how far away those molecules are. What it is what kind of containment field do they have around that piece of metal or whatever it is that he's looking at that keeps those from exploding in our dimension? Because you can't be that far away from each other without it interacting with our molecules on some subatomic level to blow us to smithereens or to suck us into a black hole or do something weird, because you cannot have that kind of distance in our world, in our dimension. So the question isn't that, the story isn't they're far apart and that's how their structure is. The question is, what kind of containment field at that subatomic level is holding them compressed enough to be here in our 3D reality? That's what I want to know.
Do you know that reminds me of implant phenomenon? You had the late Dr. Lear extract implants from alleged abductees, and in fact that happened to Whitley Strieber. Apparently, Lear and Strieber claimed that Strieber's implant had been emitting low-level FM frequencies. And it also reminds me of another case by a Robert Naslund, who in the 70s had a brain scan that revealed foreign objects implanted in the base of his frontal brain and skull, and the object in Naslund's skull were removed, and again, they too were emitting radio frequencies. But I think they were also alluding to how the isotopes and the construction of a lot of these, it couldn't have been made in or put together in our solar system, and they found that very anomalous. But again, with a lot of these strange anomalous objects like implants, when they are emitting radio frequencies, that is so peculiar, because why would extraterrestrials, or whatever you want to identify them as, abduct human beings and insert implants into their brain that emit radio frequencies?
Absolutely.
That doesn't make sense to me.
No,
That to me is like, it makes me think there's human involvement in that.
Well, on one level, we know all about it. And now we absolutely have to know at some level, if you want to call it MJ12 or the guys running the show, whatever, we know about what these ETs are doing. And I'll tell you why I know that they know. It's because the mind control aspect of the ETs that surround or interface with our planet, all of them, the reptilians, the greys, the mantid, the Puljarans, the Palladians, we've got about 10 or 12 species that interact with us on some level, interdimensionally, mind connections, whatever. The mind control at the level it's at is so profound that our government I think that is the reason they put fear into us about it, is because they never want us to discover that they actually control our thoughts on this planet, what we can think, what we know about, what we can accept. I think our emotions may be the trigger for the ETs to be afraid of us, because we're easy to control, but we're not easy to control it's not easy to control our emotions. And that may be one of the reasons they started studying us, is because of that. And we're a very unique species in that sense, because one of the things the Greys or my angels have told me about the Greys is that they don't understand our endocrine system, which I believe is God's way of giving us that spark that drives our pituitary gland to have that connection with God. is our chemical balances or whatever we have control our emotions in a very unique sense. There's very few species out there that have an endocrine system where the chemicals in our body can start controlling how we feel, what we want to eat, who we want to make love with. It's a very complex system, and it's very close to God. Okay, it's one of God's major gifts to humanity. Without that, we would have been very much like Spock, and we would have mated, out of, what do they call that? Like an obligation once every 7 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Pongfar, was that what it was?
Yeah, I think
Anyhow,
it's called the Bonfire.
yeah. So
I
I
remember
think
that.
that
I remember it. Yeah.
I think God had a really good sense of humor when he created humans, because we really are something to be studied. We are very unique in the universe. And even the Plagiarans and the Pleiadians, the ones that are all human-like, say that they were like us way back then, but they've learned to get rid of a lot of that emotional stuff, or not have it or breed it out or whatever, because why are we killing each other? Think about it. It's all over emotion at the end of the line, or religion, which is an emotional state. It's something you
Mhm.
talk yourself into believing. It's very strange. Humans are very barbaric. And every day I wake up and I think, God, it's 2025 and we're still killing each other. Why is this even happening?
Well, I
And
think
that may be the influence of the very dark side beings on this planet under mind control. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it is part of what it is to be human, as much as it is horrible and terrible. Um, Violence and death and war, but without it, I don't think we would be human. You get me? It's like another. You made the parallel with Star Trek and Spock. Another one, another parallel with a science fiction film is Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
Oh,
and
yeah.
those who have been duplicated, they're without emotion, and because they're without emotion, there is no conflict. But without that emotion, without that conflict, there is no love, and love and hate.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's the same coin. It's just that energy has been channeled in a different direction, and as horrible as it can be, uh, that is what we are. So if you don't embrace it and try and channel it, it's you know, betray-
Absolutely. But here's the problem. If we're under a type of mind control on this whole planet, every human being, that we are programmed in a way to have the violence continue. Because, I mean, do you wake up every day thinking, oh, I got to go out and kill somebody today? I mean, it's just like, it's so weird. It's like, why do guys even volunteer for the service to go out and kill people? They are literally, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, they have gotten to a point where somebody else is more evil than them, and they feel that they have to go get rid of them, you know? And I get that. Governments do that to guys. I get it. But what would happen if all the guys just said, hey, look, you government officials, you guys want a war? We'll put you in a boxing ring and you guys can box it out, and whoever wins the war. Why don't they do that? The Vikings used to do that. They used to
well,
have these big,
and
big parties.
it also makes me think of those who are deeply traumatized because of being abused as a child, and they often go on to abuse their children. And it's part of that deep trauma that that behavior is sort of passed on. And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't think I'll ever understand it. I really won't. I have a hard time with it. I just think that we are better than that in a lot of ways. And I think the Vikings, the gladiators, it wasn't until the Crusades did we have that kind of mass extinction. We used to do raids where we pilfer women and take the cows and do things, and the Vikings would raid different groups. They didn't kill as many people as people think, because who would you have to raid if you killed them all, right? I mean, and the Indians, the American Indians, did the same thing. They raid each other's camps. They do all this stuff, but the killing was a little less. If you got killed, there was a good reason for it. Okay, you did the Klan injustice. Okay,
it's the ritualization of mass murder that is, to me, really frightening. You know, when you get the Third Reich and how they murdered millions of people, and there was a religiosity about that. There was something cultural and deep-seated about their
right.
persecution and destruction. Or, you know, financial gain, as bad as that is, as petty as that is. But when you actually participate in ritualistic, you know, mass murder, that's
Yeah.
another level that only humans really participate in. And but
Yeah, all over religion, a belief. I mean, you know, the Crusades were a crazy wake up call for most humans now. I mean, looking back at it, I just look at it, I go, whoa, pretty wild. But anyhow, back to the ET whole thing. I believe that we are getting disclosure on a huge level, but it's going to be very slow dripped, and we got to remember a lot of people aren't even going to believe it, you know, at this point. Now, like you said, the younger people are going to believe it because it's just part of, they've grown up in it. They know it's real on some level, and they just accept it. What's weird about them, and this is nothing bad about them, is they don't look at it like I ever looked at it. I always thought, I got to get to the bottom of this. I want to know the scientific answers for it. I want to know how it works. I want to understand it on a profound spiritual level as well as just a mundane level. I want to know what this is all about. I have a major curiosity about it, and that's why I've had such amazing contact, I think, my whole life. It's because I'm open to it. I'm open to learning something new every day, and asking, how does this work? Why does it work? Give me the answers. And these young kids I talk to, these 25-year-olds that come to my meetings, the 35-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, I go, how did you find us? You know, whatever. And they go, oh, I was watching all these podcasts and you were on one and I didn't know you were so close. I'm here. I go, well, what do you think about the ET? Oh, I know it's real. Okay. Well, have you had an experience? Yes. Well, what are you going to do about it? Oh, nothing. It's just there. I'm like, okay.
Don't forget that a lot of this disclosure is happening on the back of a world pandemic. It shut down global civilization, and in addition to
That's
that,
true.
we're also now experiencing the largest war since World War II. So there is so much that boggles the mind. If you were to say just 6 years ago that the entire planet would be shut down because of a virus, there is so much trauma. There is so much that's out there that to process that, okay, there is disclosure that there may be interdimensional beings that are communicating, interacting with us, but there's also a pandemic that could kill you and the planet's shut down over it. What one do you process? What one do you turn to? Do you get me? There's
Exactly.
so much out there that can traumatize you, and even the illusion that there may be interdimensional beings. I mean, that is that's quite traumatic to me, especially. I know there's not, if you're processing it in a way that it seems malevolent, of course. But if you believe it's a benevolent experience and you've only had love in your life and sort of, um, I can understand what I'm trying to say is I can understand why a lot of people would be frightened or wary of contact, even though they
Right.
haven't encountered it. Because you've also got the mass media and all the film and all
Oh,
the TV shows, like, you know, even the X-Files in the early 90s about people being taken away, and a government conspiracy that involves aliens to control global civilization. A lot of that stuff has been internalized, learned, like sort of almost a form of predictive programming where people are wary of it.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And that's the part about the younger generation, I call them, that I'm happy for them that they've just kind of accepted it, you know? Whereas I was 13 years old when I got my first book on the paranormal, UFOs, JFK assassination. And I lived in a library, for 5 years after that. And I get every book that I could get my hands on. But back then, that's all we had. Nowadays, you guys are inundated with podcasts. I mean, every day there's a podcast about somebody, and you get these amazing people like Hernandez and Mario Woods and Jake Barber, and the list goes on and on. I mean, of all the people that are coming out and talking about what's happened to them. And so we're getting a very good picture about the fact that there is programs out there. The government knows about it. The military is exposing it. Things are happening. I mean, it's great. And I'm glad the younger people are just accepting it on face value, that it's either a conspiracy and the government knows about it and they're hiding it from us, but that's okay. And if not, I'm an experiencer and I know it's real and it's okay. They're very blasé about the whole thing. Whereas I was never blasé. I was always like, I want the truth and I want the answers. I was like X-Files, I want to know the truth and I want it now, right? And it's kind of refreshing for me to see this going on, that they're all very just accepting, and that's what the government, I think, right now really needs, is a lot of very accepting people, because the pushback from people my age that don't understand the phenomenon is pretty scary too. They're pulling out the devil, this is devil worship. You guys shouldn't be even touching this. And it gets really scary for them at some point. I feel bad for Luna, because I'm sure she's getting a major pushback, even from her own church, about these interdimensional beings she's talking about, right? So
yeah, and well, I mean, that was one interesting thing about reading, Jack Vallet's book. What was it called?
Passport to
Begonia. Was it
Yeah.
Passport to Begonia? Yeah, and how there's that historical, cultural overlap there. Fairy lore and kobolds and stuff like that. Or you can
Absolutely.
the biblical literature of Ezekiel's chariot, or you've got the of the Vimanas of the Bhagavad Gita. It's so pervasive and culture, and when you
It
find
is.
something,
It's been a part of us since we were created, I believe. And I believe that other dimensional beings or entities from other star systems or whatever, I absolutely believe they've done a lot of genetic manipulation of us. I have a very good friend who's passed away now, and I guess I could start talking about him. He was a major contactee. He was also a scientist. He did major experiments for DARPA and a lot of other places. But one thing he did tell me is that the government is very much aware of the fact that at some point there were some ETs that came here and manipulated to create us as we are more now than the other manipulations that were before that. And what they did is they took a red baboon and they crossed it with their own DNA and they created humans. And that is where I think the story of Adam and Eve started, was with that manipulation. Is that where the Bible came from and all that? And if you look back at the Bhagavad Gita, and that was a couple thousand years before the Bible story, they had other beings that were here that were half animals and half humans. I believe that may have been the manipulation before the last manipulation with the red baboon. That's just my opinion and what he's told me, and that he couldn't tell me certain things, but he did say he was pretty much sure that our government knows that that was our last manipulation. That we are descended from apes, but in a way that is much more further down the road, with alien DNA put in us. And they also know. They've also known for 50 years that junk DNA in us is not junk. It's the alien DNA. They've known that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they're definitely. It's been written a lot about an interception, and at one point in our history, was it David Jacobs who wrote a lot about this. I mean, I just remember back in the old Art Bell days, Jacobs used to come on the show, and I've got books in my library written, but it's been written by him, but it was a long time ago. But it was David Jacobs who wrote about that, wasn't it? That the aliens interfered with our DNA because they had lost their souls or their connection to the divine, and they were trying to re-establish that through altering our genetics. Was that?
Well, that was Jacobs who said something along those lines. And there's been others. I think Leo Sprinkle at one point said things. To me, that's always been like a red herring. I think that the ETs throw that out to us as contactees or abductees or whatever, so that we'll tell that story. I don't think that story has a lot of merit. I think they're tricksters. They're deceivers. I mean, I wouldn't believe a word they say, especially the Greys, the reptilians, and the mantis. Because if you have to do mind control and then put somebody on a table and probe them and do things to them physically, how much am I going to believe you? Whereas my ETs, a white light being by the side of the bed that just fills me with love and takes me to meet God, I mean, that's a whole different experience, right? So, and my my white light beings never have said to me, "Oh, we're time travelers. We got to get our souls back. We got to get you're our past where you need your DNA. We got to make hybrids to realign the planets. Whatever." I mean, I think it's a red herring. And even my friends that are gray abductees and have hybrid children have even said to me over a many years period of me arguing with them about it, that they are starting to believe that I was right, that there's something nefarious going on with this hybrid program that they're not telling them about. And maybe it's not all bad, but maybe it's not all good either. And I believe it. Partially, David Jacobs has been one of my heroes because he was the lone voice for so many years about how this is a horrible thing and we got to be careful. You got to take a grain of salt for David because some of that is true. I don't believe all.
Bud Hopkins was like that too. He was promoting the idea that we were being abducted and it was to interfere with our genetics or for the people were being raped and abused in the ships. Whitley Strieber himself even said that he was raped in the first abduction he could recall. And again, he turned to Bud Hopkins there. So yeah, I really think there has been a transformation in terms of how people view their contact, and they see themselves more as experiencers as opposed to victims. But do you know? I'd like to move this to the military and the hypnosis side to it, because there's a lot of hypnosis transcripts of abductees claiming human military involvement or scientific
absolutely
present during abduction, including one of the most famous abduction cases that I alluded to earlier with Travis Walton. So the whole phenomenon of MyLabs, could you describe that for?
I'd be happy to. I am part of a 3-person team that includes Misha Johnston, Melinda Leslie, and myself. I started our little team. I would call it the ladies that everybody goes to find out about MyLab, super soldiers, hypnosis, all the things that are going on in the UFO world. Melinda has met many super soldiers throughout her career of interviewing people. Look up Melinda Leslie. She's a phenom in the UFO community.
Yeah, and I actually emailed her not that long ago to see if I could get an interview with her.
Oh,
Because
I'm sure. I'm going to see her in a couple of days. I'll tell her to come on your show. Anyhow, so long story short, Melinda is the first, not the first person, but of this generation of contactees. She's the first person to have disclosed that there were military people, and Misha Johnston, both of them, to describe military people within their abduction. And they call it reabduction or MyLabs events, because Melinda and Misha would be taken by the ETs, maybe separately, maybe together, what have you. And then 2 days later or a day later, there'd be guys breaking into their house, drugging them, taking them to a base and putting them in interrogation. And their stories of these interrogations are mind-boggling. They've got to tell you themselves. You got to have both of them on. They're both amazing. And Misha's got a brand new book out that'll blow your mind. But long story short, these MyLab experiences were very prevalent in the 80s and 90s. There's a 20-year period. They're still doing it, because I've been in on one myself with both of them and 13 other people. We had a mass abduction at one point, and it was by the military. It was not by the ETs. Anyhow, it does go on. It's very prevalent in the past. It is still prevalent, but not, I would say it's dwindling down. And the reason I think it's dwindling is because our military and the guys behind that run the show, that are part of this whole disclosure, the MJ-12 guys, if that's what you want to call them, know enough about what we're up against that they don't really need to interview people anymore or put them under scopolamine to get the truth out of them, or whatever they're doing about the abductions. They know what these guys are doing, and they've known since they either had an agreement with them or whatever. I think the days of getting data about what the ETs are doing is coming to a close, because they've started the whole, mass disclosure movement going, and they wouldn't have done that had they been still confused about what the ET's agenda was, in my opinion. So that's why I believe the MyLabs was happening very, like I said, very prevalently. 80s, the 90s were chock full of it. And it went on till really good at a clip, a really good pace until about 2004 or 5. That's when I noticed the people coming to me talking about their experiences, that was slowing down. And in the last 5 years, the people I've talked to, they are very seldom being taken by the Greys anymore. And if they are, if they've been a lifelong abductee, they're not having the military connections anymore. They're just being taken by the Greys very infrequently, and being shown their children or getting an interface with them about flying the ships, or something that is kind of more mundane than, you're part of our breeding program, or we've got to program you to help change the world type of thing, which they were doing. The ETs are doing a lot of that in the 80s and 90s. They're doing a lot of hybrid program, a lot of schooling to different groups of people, a lot of, you got to, get out there and tell them they're polluting the planet, that type of thing. And it really
there's a real change in evolution almost with every generation. The contact.
Yes.
I mean, I remember watching, the old Twilight Zone episodes in the late 50s and the flying disc, and now it's perceived or interpreted as anomalous glowing orbs. And I know actually that's also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and that was that not based on a genuine information that Steven Spielberg researched for that film? You know what? I'm going to see if this video will work, because for some reason the videos haven't been playing. But there is a video, and it's testimony to the advisory committee on human radiation experiments, and it's Valerie Wolf.
Right.
I'm going to see if I can play this short clip.
Yeah, let's try it.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle on.
So, again, that is testimony to the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments. So, what do you think of the connection between, and if you do think there's a connection between mind control projects such as Artichoke, MK Ultra, and the
Yes.
phenomenon?
This is a really tough subject to talk about because I think in a very, oh boy, this is a tough subject for me to talk about. Really tough. These experiments did happen. They're all real, and they are connected in some way to the ET experience. It's not a big connection, but it's a slight connection because, well, first of all, let me go back and give everybody a little history that I know of. This is from personal experience. I used to do the JFK conferences in Dallas. I did them for 4 years, and there were Judith Berry Baker did them before me, and Chris Milligan of Trying Day Books. Then I took over for 4 or 5, maybe it was 5 years, and now David Denton.
Dr. Mary's Monkey, that was a extraordinary book. Have you read that one?
Which one?
Dr. Mary's Monkey with Judith.
I know Ed Haslam. He's an old friend of mine. Yes. Anyhow, long story short, let me give you guys a little tidbit of information that very few people know about. I'm putting on the conference. John B. Wells is my friend sitting next to me. It's the last presentation of the whole conference, and it's Ed Haslam. And Ed is up there on the podium talking and talking, and I'm falling asleep. And I kept telling John B. Wells, if I fall asleep and start snoring, you've got to kick me, okay? So John's sitting there, and I'm like laying on the table. And at the very end of his presentation, I hear, oh, I want to tell you guys about something about that I've discovered about New Orleans in 1963 that has nothing to do with the JFK assassination. My ears perked up. I sat up. I look at the screen, and he goes, I've got 3 scientists I want you guys to look at. I see the 3 scientists, and he goes, I found out who this one was, and I don't know who that one is, but do you guys know who the guy is in the middle? And I almost fell out of my chair again, Vincent, because it was Joseph Mengele. And he said, these 3 scientists were at Tulane University in 1963 while Judith Berry Baker, David Ferry, Mary Sherman, and Lee Harvey Oswald were all involved, and Lee and Ochsner at the cancer clinic were all involved in creating that fast-acting cancer. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is the story of Mary's Monkey, which people need to read.
That's a brain-bending story.
While they were doing that, these guys were over at Tulane University, and guess what they were working on? Cloning. They were working on cloning in 1963. They were cloning human body parts. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that leads me back to my friend Misha. At some point, she tells me many, many years ago that she was in a mind control program, a lot like Kathy O'Brien and many other women that I know of and have met. And she said, Lorien, I used to see Dr. Green. And I looked at her and I said, if I show you a picture, can you tell me if this is Dr. Green? She says, yes. And I'm pretty sure it was Misha. It may have been somebody else, but I think it was Misha. And I show her a picture of Joseph Mengele from 1963-ish era. She goes, that's exactly who it was. He's got a gap in his teeth. It's very hard to miss this guy. He apparently died in 1979. He was part of the paperclip program that came over here. He worked between Canada, the United States, and South America, where he had a home also. But most of his lab work was done in the United States. He was out of Los Angeles, Tucson, was it Phoenix or Tucson? I can't remember. And Louisiana, and is either Chicago or New York. But anyhow, if you look at the cluster of mind control victims, these are most of the areas that they were taken from. And I've done the research on it. I've looked back in all of the women who've come forward and looked where they were raised and who the people were running the programs. And besides him, there was Dr. Jolly in the 60s out of the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, who was doing these major mind control programs. And long story short, they started with in earnest in 1952 with the group out of Harvard that was doing Ted Kaczynski. He was part of that program. Actually, it started in 49, but after World War II, they started looking into mind control. It became part of their thing so that whenever there was war, they could take a guy, mind control him into not spilling the beans when he's being tortured. That's how it all started for our military. And it developed into, well, if we can do this, why don't we use these people? And here's another thing I want to tell everybody that's very important. Understand this. Lee Harvey Oswald was the last assassin that was not under mind control. If you go forward in time, every one of them, it started with Sirhan. It went to, what's the other shooter? The guy who shot Reagan. He was a mind control victim too. And you go down the road and you look at all these guys. The only one who wasn't was James Earl Ray. Is it James Earl Ray? I can't remember the guy who shot Martin Luther King, which he never shot him. It was a police officer, but it's a long story. But anyhow, he was also not a mind control victim, but they did a different play with Martin Luther King. They set it all up with the police department and the security people and what have you. So that was a different play altogether. But if you look at all the
so
go ahead.
There is like a spider web there, how they're all interconnected. So like you get a character like Jolly West, and Jolly West, he was the doctor who took over Jack Ruby's case when he was in prison. And
that's
not
right.
long after the interview with Jack Ruby, Jolly West starts screaming about a Jewish Holocaust occurring outside, and then you look how through the Haight-Ashbury, Jolly West was also involved with the Manson in the Manson
That's
family.
right.
And have you read the book Chaos?
Oh yes, many years ago. Yeah, when it first came out.
Fascinating as well. But yeah,
and
how do you get characters like Jolly West who just appear everywhere? It's
my God, the guy was, he was just like, well, Mengele was doing a lot of the work, but he was a lot of the times in the lab. He wasn't quite as a field guy like West would go to people and hypnotize them, scopolamine them, do the work. He would do a lot of the work. I think Dr. Green or Mengele was behind it all, running the show. But anyhow, that's my opinion. I don't know it for a fact, but let me tell you this. This is very intriguing. When Jolly West did that whole thing with Ruby, it was a precursor to him being killed with that fast-acting cancer that everybody was working on in New Orleans. And he really, and Ruby never really fell under the mind control. I want everybody to know that he didn't fall under it, but he knew he was being used by it. He knew, and he was resisting it. And that was one of the reasons they killed him. That's very important to know. He resisted the mind control that Jolly went to reprogram him so they could leave him in jail the rest of his life, right? but they realized that it wasn't working, and then they killed him. So that's very simple to know. Here's another important thing people need to know. There was a Deerfield prison in Montana in 1947 or 48 or 49. I don't remember. Maybe it was 50. There was an experiment by this whole group of mind control people that were developing stuff. I think it was a cross between Harvard and Jolly West when they were first winding up together. There was two people in prison in the same cell together, and that was Charlie Manson and the Zodiac Killer. And then in four other cells were two guys in each cell, and they were developing serial killers. That was their whole thing. Cult leaders and serial killers. That's what they were doing.
I know I'm sort of digressing here, but wasn't the Zodiac Killer the inspiration for the Gemini Killer in the film The Exorcist 3? Have you ever seen that?
I didn't see it. I don't know, but I'm sure it was.
You should see The Exorcist 3. It is a phenomenal film. If I hadn't been up, because I've been up for like almost 20 hours now, I would be able to give you a really good description of the film. But it is a phenomenal film that goes into brainwashing. For example, as you know, Blatty, he worked for the CIA. Wasn't he an intelligence officer? And the idea, the premise of the film wasn't so much that, from what I understand, the little girl was possessed. It was more that she was, or you could interpret as that she was suffering from dissonant identity disorder. That the two are very closely related. It's just the scientific or pseudo-scientific psychological nomenclature is so different, but they're describing the same phenomenon, essentially, where the mind splits and the little girl, because of trauma, is taken over and a new personality forms. And that's it goes more into it in The Exorcist 3. But there's got more of a demonic element to it. But it's a phenomenal film. Sorry for throwing it.
No, that sounds fascinating. I've got to watch it now because now I'm all intrigued. So I have to do that.
No, it really is. It's got that actor who George C. Scott. George C. Scott.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And Brad DeRofe, he's the man that's possessed in it, but he's not only demonic possessed, he's a serial killer.
Oh wow, that's crazy! That's just crazy.
I think it was who was a serial killer who was a cannibal? Jeffrey Dahmer. That was the film he would watch.
Ugh.
Yeah, that was the film he would watch while he was killing his victims, because that would trigger his alter ego or his dissonant state where he would believe he too was possessed. So every time or most times he would kill people in the flat, he would watch Exorcist 3, and it was fascinating.
Oh, you mean Silence of the Lambs?
No, I mean The Exorcist 3. Jeffrey Dahmer would watch The Exorcist 3 while he was killing his victims. No, because one of his victims escaped, and he told the story to the police that every time the possession scene appeared, because there's 3 possession scenes in the film The Exorcist 3, and every time the possession scene appears, Jeffrey Dahmer would change his behavior and would act possessed himself. And so he basically figured out that the next time a possession scene would, be on the screen, Dahmer would change his behavior and he would have an opportunity to escape. And that's how he got out. But again, The Exorcist 3 is one of the best horror movies, in my opinion, ever made, because it does involve not only the supernatural, but the idea of mind control and possession. They just overlap, and it explains that quite brilliantly.
Absolutely. I mean, now you're freaking me out because now I'm thinking Dahmer was a mind control victim too.
Yeah, well,
that's his trigger is the movie. I mean, like Catcher in the Rye was for the guy that was stalking what's her name, the actress, and then tried to shoot Reagan. He had Catcher in the Rye with him, and also didn't the guy who shot John Lennon? He had Catcher in the Rye, if I remember correctly.
And what's that saying about real life imitating art, or art imitating real life? Because again, and the character in The Exorcist 3, the Gemini Killer, is based on the real life Zodiac Killer, but Jeffrey Dahmer was basing his behavior on the Gemini Killer in the film. So it was a case of real life imitating art.
That's insane. I mean, this whole mind control thing, I'm telling you folks, it is really probably the holy grail of all of everything that's going on around us. Even my buddies that were in the major remote viewing programs don't like to touch the mind control stuff because they know that the government has programs around this that eclipse financially everything else they were ever doing in remote viewing.
Mhm.
I mean, there's been more money spent on how to control you and I on a daily basis. And trust me, they've gotten so far. I mean, how many people are just addicted to their cell phone? I mean, that alone is a mind control program. And
Yeah.
people, if they don't understand that, then there's no help for them.
Yeah, that's it. We don't need to do it with chemicals and drugs anymore. We can do it.
That's right.
We can hypnotize you using your
Frequency.
phone. Yeah, the blue light of a phone is addictive. You know, that's one of the reasons you just can't take your eyes off the phone. The blue light. It wasn't the one eye bandit machines in Las Vegas, but were the first machines to utilize blue light, and the CIA studied that. The behavior of people entering the casinos and just spending hours and hours playing the one eye bandit, and they, figured out that it was a blue light that was involved in them being almost hypnotized into that,
That's right.
behavior.
Absolutely. And every glasses I have on, they got blue light blockers. I
should be wearing mine myself. I usually do wear mine. Can you also explain what targeted individuals are?
Oh, yeah, sure. Now, back in the day when I was doing my mind control conferences, they were actually titled Mind Control Super Soldiers and Targeted Individuals. And let me tell you, folks, I can't do them anymore. I did 3 of them, and they were so extraordinary that it's going to be a book, because it should be a movie, because it's so wild, the things that went on. And sadly, I need to report that probably 1/4 of all the people that ever spoke for me are now dead, and which is really crazy. If you look at the amount of people I had over 3 years, that's 10 people, that's 30 people. That means that, 6 of them are dead. Or 7 or 6, I can't even remember, but it's an extraordinary number for a 3-year conference with a lot of the same people, a lot of different people. Yeah, bottom line is those kind of odds don't happen in reality, in normal life, okay? When I put on a conference, I expect to see most of those people live until they're 100 years old, right? But many of these people died, and all of them were men. I have one woman that's dying now. It's another whole story, but anyhow, very bizarre conferences. And the reason why I think this is because a lot of the targeted individuals that you just asked about were very boisterous, along with the guys who were talking about mind control. Those are the ones that are dead. The MyLabs people and the super soldiers aren't quite as dead. It's mostly the mind control and the targeted individuals.
Mm-hmm.
The targeted individuals that I was dealing with were the ones that were being attacked by the military itself. There were a lot of them. And these were people that were crossing over into the mind control programs. And some of them had even had ET experiences, which made them very unique. So that may have been one of the reasons that they were targeted as heavily as they were, is because they weren't just a regular targeted individual. A regular targeted individual can be targeted for many reasons. One of them I did meet at my conference was a guy who was pretty prominent in his city council at one point, and he complained to his next door neighbor about the fact that her cat was like, pooping in his yard or something. I don't remember what it was. Within a week of him doing that complaint with her and having kind of a fight with her, he started experiencing physical pain where it felt like his body was on fire and all kinds of weird things were happening to him. Well, he found out 6 months later, and after many doctor visits, that he was being targeted by some type of energy weapon from across the street at her house or next door to her house, whatever it was. They had set up something across from his bedroom and were attacking him with it. And the reason he got attacked was because her brother was in DARPA and was working on these experiments, and she was pissed, and she knew that he was doing something like this. Don't ask me how. And he started going over there and attacking this guy with these directed energy weapons. It's just so bizarre to me. I mean, this is just one story. It happens to all kinds of people. If you're a whistleblower, or here's what happened to one of our main guys that died. He was a targeted individual. He was also an ET contactee, but he went up against the Social Security Division of the state of Washington. He won a huge lawsuit. In his lawsuit, he got it so that hundreds of people got back pay on a Social Security deal, whatever, and it cost the state like $1 billion because he won this lawsuit. So within 2 weeks of that lawsuit being won, they started directed energy weapons on him. They started a mind control program on him, and they started torturing his wife. And she divorced him, left, took the kids, the whole bit. And then finally, this man dies. And under very bizarre circumstances, I must say. But he was targeted for 4 years very heavily. And it all started after he won that huge court case. So I don't know if this is something that's pretty normal. Like if you buck the system and they don't like you for some reason, that they go after you. But in all the cases I've ever dealt with, it's been very prominent that if you start fighting somebody on the city council level, state level, federal level, whatever, they're going to come after you and they're going to do nasty things to you.
Yeah, there are a lot of technologies that are readily available that you can use to harass people. For example, you can purchase ultrasonic acoustic devices that a lot of people use as animal repellents, and if that's in a garden and you're passing that, especially if you're young, that can not only give you tinnitus, but it can cause headaches, dizziness, sickness. Those things can be really annoying for a middle-aged person. For a young person, they can be harmful, and you can go on Amazon and buy them for like $10.
Yeah.
That's
just one tactic. I mean, there are a million things these guys do. I had a friend, and I wouldn't say he's a friend, he's more of an acquaintance, but long story short, he was a whistleblower for the NSA. And since he's been, dealing with this whole whistleblowing from the NSA, he has gotten 2 bacterial infections that are the flesh-eating bacteria. But not until he was a whistleblower and not until he started, really hammering on these guys, did he end up in the hospital with bacterial infections of flesh-eating bacteria. And he's never had anything like it in his life, and he's not exposed to it and what have you. So I am pretty sure that they have done this to him. He's had both of his legs from the knees down taken, and the poor man's in a wheelchair the rest of his life. And that to me, that's targeting. If you go after a whistleblower because he's going to squeal on the government, what a horrible thing to do to somebody. But anyhow,
I think also the case I mentioned earlier, I think it was Robert Naslund, Peter Lindstrom, a professor at the University of California, he looked at Naslund's implants and he agreed that they were transmitters, and he theorized they could be used for radio hypnotic intracerebral control. And when you
That's
look at a
right.
lot of the documents in the public domain, that you can go back to like the 1970s,
Delgado.
and you have the MK Ultra sub-project documents disclosed by the Church Committee. You know, I think it was sub-project 119 that
Yep.
119 that they had um, transmitter implants that they were working with and inserting into animals back in the 1970s. So if that's what they were doing back then, and they readily admit they had that technology and they were using that technology, you know, what are they using now? You know, it's not a conspiracy theory; it's a reality.
It's a fact. And see, this is the part they don't teach anybody in school. And good luck finding about. I mean, you had to go dig for that information, didn't you? I mean, we all have to dig for it unless you get the book by Delgado's the bowl, the implant in the bowl and all that, and the
Yeah.
monkeys. I mean, I got that book somewhere around here and I can't find it, which is probably a good thing because the pictures are horrific about
Mm.
what they did to these poor animals. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Anyhow, yeah, this is a fact. Our government's been doing it. It's been going on since the end of World War II. We are well versed in it. They control our minds. And, even the ETs told me back in 2011, I had a very profound download with them as I was walking to a window to see a big black triangle outside of it. And I'm pretty sure it was our military with the ETs up in the triangle, and I'm pretty sure they were talking to me about stuff that I was going to be doing in the future. But anyhow, point is, what they said to me, one of the first things they said to me was, we can control your mind. We know exactly what you're thinking at any given moment, and we can control you and have you do exactly what we want. That's not what we're here tonight to do to you, but you need to know this, that's what's going on with every human being on your planet, is that
Mhm.
they're under this type of control. And every one of them is susceptible to it. There's no getting out of it. There's ways to deal with it through a lot of work mentally, but there's no getting out of it. It's part of being here and being a human on this planet at this time, is that they have complete control over us at a drop of a penny, drop of a hat, whatever you want to say. These guys, these ETs, can control everybody on the planet. And our government is in cahoots with them at some level and has been working with them since, like I said, really significantly since the late 40s.
And
And that's
that's
a fact.
that's not even bringing in artificial intelligence platforms,
Oh, God.
linking up with Neuralink implants that could be inserted into your brains. You know, that's something.
The
You
whole
know,
AI thing has got me just freaked out. Because I think what's happening, honestly, in my opinion, this is just Lorien talking here. I think the ETs have tapped into the AI and they're actually controlling it.
yeah, it's something
I
that.
mean, I hate to say it, that was the first thought I had when Chat GPT hit my phone. I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And I asked it something, and it talked to me, and I was like, "Okay, wait a minute. This is the same type of interface all the contactees have. Are you kidding me? We
Mhm.
just have it inside our head, or we can communicate telepathically with them, right? So this is doing the same thing, but on a device. It's like really scary, very
Mhm.
scary. I think they've got control of it. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, Laurie, I'm going to have to wrap this up because it is a ungodly hour and it's 3:30 over here. And um, but it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And again, like I've learned quite a few things, and so I'm going to have to listen back to this and because you mentioned a few things for me to look into. Is there anything you would like to promote or tell the audience about before?
Well, I just think it's really important, everybody, that you don't just believe everything at face value, that you please do some research. And I don't mean just go listen to somebody like me on a podcast. I would like you to try to find old books, old information, somebody that's been in the program that you're looking into. If you have a friend who's an experiencer, talk to them. If you want to be an experiencer yourself, I can tell you guys how to do it. It's very simple. You ask God, you ask the ETs, you ask your angels, you ask anybody who's going to listen to you that you would like to have that kind of contact, but you'd like to have it for good, not for anything weird, but just, for good, and that you've got to not be afraid. Everybody says, "Oh, I'm ready for contact. I can do it. I can handle it." But when that gray thing appears at the foot of your bed, it'll scare the bejesus out of you. You got to have fortitude. You've got to be able to fight through the fear. And they're going to get right up close to your face, because here's something else. I'm going to drop a tidbit on you guys. Some of the ETs can only control us through our optical nerve. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I'm not even supposed to talk about that. But they can control us through their optical nerve. They have to make that connection. There's a frequency connection through our eyes into our brain that completely connects us with them. So, long story short, pray for it. Ask God to send it to you because you're ready for it. And if you do get that kind of connection, please use it for good. Use it to help other people, and use it to, help humanity at some level. If you do that, they will come. I promise you, they will come. But you've really got to be ready. It's not something that's just going to be like, tomorrow, and it's going to scare you to half to death. Okay, get really prepared and pray a lot.
Okay. Well, Lorien, it's been great speaking to you. Fascinating. And I'll say good night, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Thanks for staying up for me.
My pleasure. Right. Okay. Right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Press platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a Ractogino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Go press platinum. You know it's a gas. Morn vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass. Society, living on station, part of the alliance, the United Federation, picking up the pieces from the cardi occupation. You could be a Klingon with a genetic mutation, a symbiont Tandorian, a tortured Irish curly-haired Caucasian. Waiting on the holosuite, playing a game of space dolls. Really matters not, everyone is welcome in quarks. Yes, everyone is welcome in quarks. Everyone is welcome in quarks. Gold press platinum, you can buy your own moon. Drinks with little hats in them. Come back soon, spin your heart on dough. It comes from dying stars. You just have to imagine these slips, strips, bricks and bars. Slips, strips, bricks and bars. Gold press platinum. Greed, greed, greed. It's better than religion, family, fat Ferengi cackling. He knows it's so fine. Someone get him a napkin for his 2 grubs and Tollaberry wine. 2 grubs and Tollaberry wine. Rule number 47, expand or die.